come over to that screen. Let's do this as I kind of get my gig going on here. Yes, thanks for the all the birthday comments and messages and so forth. Thank you so much. I tend to have not, really replied to them because there's so many of them. But this year, let's just get through this and see who really cares. And after 54 birthdays, it's like, God, come on, enough already. All right. What a day. Finally ready to get rid of some of that cold weather back east, thaw out some of those plants in the gardens, get all the snow off the ground and the grass and places that accumulated, even in the shadows, kind of nook back in there in that place that hasn't seen any sunshine yet. But I want to talk about briefly square clouds. We have those now and again, and that was always one of the things that kind of had me wondering what's going on up in the skies. How can we get a cloud taking a formation with four right angles, four straight on corners? How can that happen if we're dealing with a free flowing gas? It's like you don't see squares very often in the ocean. And if you do, it's because you've got two intersecting wave patterns that would create those peaks, which would create or pattern out in a square if those points are precisely oriented so that you can get that proper kind of reflection pattern. So it's not often that you would typically see a square in the ocean or the waves, and you can Google them, or look at for them on YouTube. They will be there. And they're kind of something else to see, but in the sky, that simply shouldn't be happening. Let's start on with temperatures. Pop on out full screen. Still some remaining and some residual cool weather in the Northeast with some 30s, and we'll get to some of the record cold that has been in place across Ontario and Quebec in eastern Canada, some of the record low highs. Much of the rest of the eastern U.S., these are comfortable readings for early evening. 60s in the Carolinas, down to 70s into Georgia, and of course, Florida is Florida. In the central southern plains, 40s and 50s, but they've been dealing with some strong thunderstorms surging toward the Gulf coastal states this evening. We'll look at that on radar. And then out west, it has been far more unsettled than in recent days, and that has taken the edge off the heat through Arizona, New Mexico, and even the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, where we had been looking at 105 plus. Today, we're lower to middle 90s at the upper limit. So definitely cooler because of the activity. And we can see some of Ottawa weather records. Tomorrow's forecast low of -3 Celsius, or about 27 Fahrenheit, would be the lowest temperature Ottawa has recorded on May 13th since they have begun records way back in 1872. And I want to look at this. This is kind of an unusual plot. You don't see this employed in the States very often, where they've got a plot of the year down at the bottom, and then the temperatures in Celsius, centigrade on the x-axis, or the y-axis, excuse me. And then there's kind of like a bowl here where you can see some cooler temperatures in the 20s and 30s, even one outlier in the mid 40s, and then the warmer weather that we've been dealing with for the last 40, 50 years, and then progressively cooler and cooler temperatures for lows. And that would leave Ottawa looking for this is still a forecast. This has not happened yet, as the coolest forecast high for tomorrow, which is awfully chilly. For Knoxville, Tennessee, high of 63, 49 or 39 for a record low this morning. And then another record for Barrie, also as we get up into Canada, as they look at their coldest low since 1866. And it kind of goes on and on and on as we're seeing some of this very chilly weather. We'll get to another look at Twitter here in a moment. Okay, this is a satellite picture, as we've often seen across the states, with the extent of the cold air under these low-level stratus clouds all the way from Texas-Oklahoma border. So the big thunderstorms just now happening at sunset, pushing into the Gulf Coast of Texas. And then that chilly air banked up against, or nearly banked up. It's kind of eaten away a little bit today against the Colorado Rockies, and then just the unsettled weather through the western states, and still a few snow showers progressing across the Empire State. A little closer look out west, some much needed precipitation in California after starting the water year with some great rains and great mountain snows. And then literally it's like the faucet got turned off. The mountains, the resorts, everybody else just holding their breath through the entire month of February with nothing coming out of the sky. So they picked up very, very little precip in California through that very important month of February, where it is crucial that they make headway because the rest of the year typically is very dry. There's the snow as we look through southern New York State. And then a look at the bigger storms rumbling south through Texas, not quite to Victoria, Austin. Let's throw the cities overlay so you can kind of get your orientation going on there. Bearing down to Corpus Christi, provided they hold together. This is our forecast as we look out 3 days, still unsettled. And whenever we bring in blue colors, that's going to indicate a mixed precipitation. So from the Sierra of California through the Mountain West, that's today, tomorrow, there's still those higher terrains, but the risk of severe weather begins to emerge through the high plains once again, from the Big Bend area of Texas all the way through Lincoln, Nebraska, and points east and west of there. That severe risk is narrowed down tomorrow to along the frontal boundary through central Missouri on up through probably Gary, Indiana, Chicago, Illinois, and potentially into southern Michigan, with still weather cool enough that higher elevation mixed precip or snow remains likely in the northern Rockies. There's our where we've seen lightning over the last little while. Let's see if we can't get that animated. And the whiter stripes are the more frequent or the more recent lightning strikes. So Sheridan, Wyoming, on up to Spearfish, South Dakota, Rapid City, South Dakota, and then a smattering once we get on the east side of the Cascades. We'll come into Texas. You'll be able to see numerous strikes, by the hundreds associated with these thunderstorms as they're racing south. Some of the weather stories we're looking at right now. Stormy weather patterns in the plains and Midwest could trigger severe thunderstorms and flooding. We'll look at that flooding risk in a moment, and then finally pushing all of the cold weather that had been locked into the Great Lakes states and eastbound, and to some extent, literally from the Rockies east, that trend is about to end. Eastern Pacific hurricane season officially begins this Friday, the 15th of May. And if you're interested in why that is important, look at Weather Underground. And then the hurricane season could start early with the system brewing off the southeast coast. And we will look at that now. So here's the jet stream forecast running out 2.5 weeks. The minor ridge still, this is what the rains out west are having to battle. We're sending a lot of moisture in and thunder showers, and it's enough. And you've got the elevation already keeping the atmosphere unstable. You lift any air parcel up to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 feet, and it tends to get unstable very, very quickly. And so the west tends to see these showers bloom pretty much, well, not every day of the year, but often. They're just primed because of elevation alone. You add a little moisture to the mix, plus the strength of the May sunshine, and well, you get this. You get a lot of activity out there. So we'll see this ridge weaken as it is finally overrun by this inbound Pacific storm. And with that, an onslaught of moisture. We're going to try to re-wet these mountains and keep these high valleys that are likely already been planted. They're seeded with the spring and summer crops. This wave progresses off to the east. It will likely support the risk of some severe weather in this region ahead of the trough, which is right here, out in here as we get towards the latter part of the week. And then if we look off the coast of Florida, right in here, up at 18,000 feet, we've got a little circulation. Look at that happen. Now, this is still 18,000 feet in the atmosphere, and you're not typically looking, for the big tight circulation for a tropical type of storm. But look how long it sits there. The waters are warming up. Let's just say they're warming up. There's plenty of energy. There's humidity. The sun is working its darndest. But then it kind of gets disconnected from the jet stream. It's a little far south from the westerlies, which have now lifted up towards New England and then into California as we get to next Tuesday. So about a week, a little more than a week from right now, we've got another storm coming ashore. And this is going to be a little bit of a late season event for the folks out west. So it will bring them some moisture and then potentially some unsettled weather circulating across Louisiana. And these are places that are relatively have the top moisture, that like the top 1 foot of the soils are a bit on the dry side. So these could be really welcome rains. We'll run this model all the way out and just kind of talk about the end result. Good precip for the Sierras, the Cascades, the Bitterroots, and the northern panhandle of Idaho. Nice range in deep into South Texas. This is a time of year where we begin to see the monsoons waking up. So it's not necessarily expected. It's a bit early, but because they are so dry, it is very welcome. The risk of heavier, prolonged rains in northern Oklahoma, southern Kansas, not quite as bullseyed as it was yesterday. Let's pop out here. And the blue is snow, so we're still dealing with some of that mixed precipitation discussed earlier through the northern Rockies. But it's this. This is kind of what I'm interested. This would potentially develop into tropical depression, Arthur, because the area is under high watch. We've got a nice, strong easterly flow with the trade winds taking shape. So driving some moisture across the Bahamas, showers into Florida, and then the kink develops. We begin to see some kink and some closed circulation. So we will definitely watch. What's our center strength there? About 1,000, 3,004 millibars. So not terribly deep, but considering the high pressure that had been in place, yeah, there's quite a nice little rate. So that's going to bring on some substantial winds. And then it kind of begins to be merged in with some cooler weather off of New England and becomes a hybrid type of storm. And then a week from now, still the rains into California, a little bit unsettled, and we'll take it because the summers can be just a long, drawn out, dry event out west with thunderstorms at the risk for fires. Fires have they had a wicked season last year, so this is definitely welcome to get some of these rains. So the National Hurricane Center, if we want to take a look at what they're focusing on, so they've got an area of low pressure expected to form just north of the Bahamas late this week or early this weekend. That means Thursday night at the earliest and probably Saturday late at the soonest. So they've highlighted this, and if they've shaded it in red, that means that the probability of development is at or greater than 60%. So we're going to look at that. As we mentioned earlier, it would be titled Arthur. Now, they cycle these names, I believe it's every 7 years. So we've had Arthur a couple of times. Alan was the last one that I can remember being dropped out, and I think about 1980. We probably had another one. That's 40 years in between then and now. So Arthur will be the one who we'll probably be talking about as we head into the weekend, plus a continuation of the showers out west. And of course, for those geoengineering folks on the leading edge of that, so Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and probably Southern California, lots of trails anticipated in the skies in the next 2-3 days. And we'll check back in tomorrow to see if there's any more square clouds around. We'll have a look at that. All right, guys, have a great evening and keep looking up.